Hi, everybody. This is Dave Levine with Trickle Research. This morning we have Taz Turner with CordovaCann Corp. CordovaCann is a cannabis company, and we started covering them in late-ish August. So we've not been at this too long. The company has primarily, to this point, operated, and really just fairly recently, began operations in Canada. And some recent events have kind of had the stars align on some things they've been working on in the United States as well, but I think are starting to line up. So, I thought it'd be a good idea to have Taz come and just give us a little bit of an overview of the company, and then we're going to touch on some more specific things that are kind of topical to me at least. So we're just gonna go down that path and see where it takes us. So Taz, I thought maybe at first, maybe you could just give us a brief overview of the company. And then the other thing I'd really like to do is I'd like for you to give a little bit of your background, because I don't know that you're unique in the cannabis space, but I think you've had sort of a unique set of experiences that have kind of put you in this spot. So maybe just brief overview of the company and then a little bit about how you got here.
Okay, sure. So you know what, I'll take those in reverse because it may make more sense. So my background just quickly is mostly in finance, originally in private equity, and then worked for a couple of different hedge funds before starting my own in 2010. My background for the most part is in technology and consumer investments. And I kind of started investing in the cannabis space back in 2012, 2013. Primarily initially in Canada, and then focusing on the US, more recently, I'd say over the last 5 years. And so as I got to know that space in depth and also the players in it, that's kind of what drove the idea of what is now CordovaCann. And so, at the time, back in 2017, when CordovaCann was founded, most of the players, especially in the US, were going after the more nascent markets and not focused on the more, I like to say, developed markets. I don't like to say mature, because I think we have a long way to go in every market. But the idea was to essentially show investors that these developed markets, could turn a profit. Yeah, I think investors, especially in Canada initially, were surprised that a lot of these companies took so long to turn a profit, or may not turn a profit ever. And so the idea was to focus on both Canada and the more developed U.S. markets to show what the profitability of this business could be. And so with that, we went out and we really have two key operations. The first is a retail business in Canada. We just opened last week our 5th retail store. We are on track to open approximately 15 stores by the middle of next year. And then our second operation is in Oregon. We have a cultivation facility about 16 miles outside of Portland. They've been cultivating since 2016. The business right now, quite honestly, is in very good shape because of not only the increased demand of the pandemic, but also because of the decreased supply with the moratorium on licenses. And so we have that operation, which currently is a very small operation. When we bought into it, of about 1,000 square feet of indoor space. We've built that out to 10,000 square feet, and we just got our license on the 20th of November. So we're finishing that build out, and we'll have that expanded cultivation underway in the first part of next year. And then we hope to put there's a pending license with the regulator in Oregon for manufacturing. And we hope to have that manufacturing on the same site sometime, first half of next year as well.
Okay. So there's some interesting nuances, I think, with respect to, so let's take Canada first. So there's interesting nuances, I think, about Canada that I'm not sure that everybody's aware of. I mean, certainly people who follow the cannabis space, I think, would be familiar with it, but I'm a generalist, so I write things from soup to nuts. So maybe some of the people who follow some of the things I do may not be as familiar with that. So I think it's worth at least covering a little bit. Can you kind of give me an overview of sort of what's transpired in Canada since the federal legalization, and just some of the high points of how that's changed the market or impacted the market?
Sure. So I guess just to back up a step, when we are focused on the U.S., we're mostly focused on cultivation and manufacturing businesses because we thought that those were the highest value part of the food chain. And then obviously, if we could get a vertically integrated operation in a particular market, like Oregon or Washington or any other market, that there was some value to that. Not only for tax reasons, but just for supply demand reasons and a number of others. But when you look at Canada, Canada evolved very differently than these various markets in the U.S. And in Canada, what started was when we got legalization, and it was medically legal since 2001. But when we got the push towards recreational legalization in kind of the 15, 16 timeframe, everybody went out prior to that, kind of in the 2013, 14, 15 timeframe, and everybody went out and got a cultivation license because that was the license you could get. It was the only one that was available. And so every player in Canada had a cultivation license or was trying to get one. And then, second from the second piece of that was manufacturing licenses became available, and there's less manufacturing licenses or manufacturers in Canada than there were as the rush was for the cultivation licenses. And then finally came the retail licenses, and the various provinces rolled out the retail licenses in various different manners. So like in the case of Alberta, it's the most developed province from a retail standpoint, but there's still a lot of opportunity there, and we're going to go after that market. But in the case of Ontario, they went back and forth between a government-led model to a private model, and really were pushing that private model around the end of 2019. So it's only been, really under that new model for about 15 months. And so we've been an early player to that market and have been able to kind of reap the rewards of being early, and also in picking markets that we think are underserved and where we're, one of the few games in town, so to speak. So, and then, similarly, Manitoba, we just announced actually very early this month, that we did a deal with a partner in Manitoba. We have our first store open there. We should have a couple more stores open over the next 6 months. And that's a very, very nascent market. There were 4 players that were initially let into that market. And then they reopened those licenses. And we're one of the very, very first new licensees to be in that market, and just opened up that store on the 2nd of December. So they're all in various stages, but safe to say that the retail market as a whole is much more nascent in Canada than it is, than the other parts of the value chain are in Canada. And therein lies the opportunity. There's a lot of pent up demand in a lot of markets in Canada right now.
And just to be clear, I've sort of raised this issue, and maybe I make more of it than really I should, or that is the reality. But just to be clear, in Canada, the federal government took control of the regulation of sort of a portion of the supply chain, right? But the local governments then were given control of other portions. So as I understand it, the local jurisdictions have more control over the dispensing side and how many they want to have and how or not have. And so that's part of the reason why when you say some of those markets are more developed than others, part of that is the result of kind of that regulatory structure and those local jurisdictions, just going about it differently. So it really has created some opportunity and certainly differences one jurisdiction to the next.
No, that's a good point. So in the cultivation and the manufacturing side of the business in Canada, that's more federally governed. But when it comes to the dispensary models, that's more provincial governed. And so therefore, like I was just discussing, and like you reiterated, we're in various stages of the rollouts depending on the province. And so it is important because, it allows us, we're not anywhere close to late to the game in this retail business when it comes to Canada. And it allows us to, just like any other retailer, the focus and the main focus is still location, location, location. But it's early, and we're starting to see, or we are seeing, some tremendous returns on capital with the stores that we've already put in place up there. And that's why we're trying to roll out this model even faster than we originally anticipated. Some back, about 8 months ago now is when we made that acquisition.
I don't want to take you somewhere that you don't want to go, but can you talk a little bit about, I sort of feel like the first two stores are probably the most relevant, because now you've got a little bit something to kind of back test, or a little bit, they've been there long enough that maybe you can make some assessments about that. But can you talk a little bit about how they've performed relative to what your expectations were, and that sort of thing?
Sure. So we've publicly said that the expectations of the stores were about $2.5 to $3 million a store on an annualized basis, Canadian dollars, and then them to do about 500,000, 400 to 600,000 in EBITDA on an annualized basis. The first stores, when we rolled them out, they were profitable from day one. The returns were tremendous. It took about 90 days or so for them to get to a place where they were more steady state, but they grew throughout that process, and then became more steady state. The way that we kind of look at it is, this is a market where there's not you can't do a ton of advertising in those markets, but certainly the additional advertising and getting the word out certainly does get an added boost. And so those two stores were put in place in June and July respectively, and we've been able to get the word out a bit more. The last the third store has been opened about a month now, and stores 4 and 5 were just opened in late November and literally last Friday, so 4 days ago. And so it's kind of early to tell, but we see those similar trends in terms of they start off, they're very they're profitable out of the gate, but they continue to ramp as more and more people learn about them. And I guess to your point more directly, those first two stores have significantly exceeded our expectations in terms of that model, those top line and EBITDA line models that we've put forth. And we're just hoping that the additional stores we put in place will continue to do that as well.
So you just raised a really interesting point, I think, and it's sort of another one of the things that I believe about the cannabis space that I don't know if it's terribly intuitive, but it's just sort of my sense of the direction of the thing. It feels to me like the space, and I know in the United States a little different because we still have some things to deal with, federally and different jurisdictions and different rules and whatnot from one to the next. So maybe a little bit different there, but it just seems to me that the end here, or as we roll out and the market does become more mature, it does start to take on just sort of more normal, I guess, predictable kind of business attributes. And so to that point, you talked a little, you just referenced it a little bit, but I'm thinking that when you think of consumer goods, I guess, branding starts to matter, and some of those, like I say, more typical business functions or attributes, I guess. And in that regard, you guys have the Starbuds brand, and I wonder if you can touch on a little bit sort of how that came about and why you think that's important, and maybe branding in general, but in this case Starbuds specifically. Can you just cover a little bit of that?
Sure. So yes, I mean, when we found the Starbuds international acquisition, which we completed in April, when I initially looked at it, I thought that it would be less interesting purely because I've been focused on the cultivation and manufacturing opportunities, mostly in the US, but also in Canada, and looking at those various opportunities over the last 3 years. So when I looked at retail, certainly I was very familiar with Canada retail, but I just didn't know as much about it as I did the other parts of the value chain. So as I dug into it, I think what really interested me was a couple of things. One was this was an opportunity that had built a company that had built out a number of stores in Canada, mostly in Alberta and in British Columbia, and they just weren't able to get them through the regulatory process. So they had dumped over $10 million into this opportunity, and we were buying that for, you know, a fraction of that, and able to get the deal done. And really, they'd spent a lot of money. We're not talking about they weren't building Apple stores like you know, some other players have done, but they were nice stores. They put a lot of money into them. They put a lot of time into them, and they'd found great locations and leases. And so we thought that you know, after doing a lot of due diligence, we thought it was an opportune time to take advantage of that discount from the dollars that were put into it. And also, we were very comfortable that we could get it through the regulatory process under the Cordova umbrella. So as we did that, you know, we obviously that evolved as we were able to open up stores in Ontario and now Manitoba. But the other piece of that was, in addition to price and location, was really the Starbuds brand. And so Starbuds was created in Colorado in 2013. It's a Denver-based brand, although they have 21 stores in various different markets throughout the country, predominantly in Colorado. But as we dug into that business, as we dug into that business, they were certainly further along than Starbuds International was. And we could look at the economics of that business and what was successful in that market. And what I can say is I've looked at a number of retail businesses in the US. That business model was the most profitable business model that I'd seen in the US after looking at a number of different companies. And they did it, you know, for a number of different reasons, but really because they, you know, were running it as any other retail operation. They were concerned about what the build costs were. They were concerned about what the you know, OpEx employee costs were on an ongoing basis, and they filled it with product that you know, was in demand. And if you go to those stores in Colorado, you can see that demand. It's pretty evident. And so we were going to be able to, if we purchased the Starbuds International assets, which we ended up doing, we were going to be able to leverage off that, not only that brand, which you're talking about, which is well known, but also that know-how and that platform to be able to stand up this Canadian operation probably much more quickly than we would have been able to do otherwise. And so that was really the value. You know, Brian Rudin, the CEO and founder of Starbuds, is an advisor to Cordova, and he's been a help in terms of, you know, being able to understand the experiences that he went through in building that brand in the US and allowing Cordova to leverage that experience into Canada.
So, I mean, obviously, then your sense is that maybe as we sit here today, but certainly moving forward as well, that branding does matter. I mean, is that how you see the direction of the industry, sort of on the dispensary, on the retail level? Is branding going to be more common as we move forward? I mean, is it going to be something that maybe you're going to have to embrace to be successful? I'm just sort of curious what your thoughts are on branding in general.
Sure thing. No, and I absolutely think branding is important. I think we're in the nascent stages of it. So I think that many people, you know, going back 5 years ago, thought that we'd be further along in the branding process in the cannabis realm across not only just Canada, but across the US and also just across the world in general. But I do think it's important. I think it will evolve, and I think it, you know, as we see kind of the move towards US legalization and decriminalization, I think you'll start to see it take, you know, more significant jumps forward. But I do think it's in the very early stages. We placed a lot of value on that brand, but I do want to be clear that we placed a lot of value on that brand, but we placed it on mostly because not only was it well known in the US, but because it had a platform that was established and very successful, and a platform that we could leverage quickly. So I think that's important. I do think there's brand loyalty in the dispensary space, and I only think it'll become more significant, you know, over time. And then I will say, just because we're on the topic of brands, I think there is another layer beyond just the dispensary brand itself, which is the brand of products. And I do think that, again, I think we're in the nascent stages of that. I do think we'll see, you know, branding become more and more relevant over time. And I do think that, you know, these companies that we're talking about, ubiquitous brands across multiple markets or across the US or Canada, will happen. I just think that we haven't gotten there yet. There's very few players, and definitely less than I can count on one hand of players that have been reasonably successful in developing a brand across multiple markets. And, you know, I do think that'll happen over the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years at both the dispensary level, manufacturer level, and also the product level as well.
So, in the U.S., obviously you have now Oregon, which just to kind of clarify there, that's something that you have had in place for quite some time, or that was sort of in the works. But like with a lot of this, you know, you had licensing and those sorts of challenges that you had to get past. But all of that sort of coming together is that's a fairly significant catalyst, it seems to me.
Yeah, it took us a long time, a lot, and quite honestly, a lot longer than we expected to get that license transferred in Oregon. That does give us we've already put a lot of capital into the expansion project, and now with the license in our hands, that does give us the opportunity to leverage that expansion and, you know, take it, you know, really kind of 10x the size of that cultivation operation in pretty short order, kind of over the next 6 months. And then it also gives us a lot more confidence as we continue to expand in the U.S. I mean, we've announced another acquisition in Washington on the manufacturing side of the business. So the hope is there that, you know, we can that's an operating entity. We'll be able to not only push products into that Washington facility, but we'll also be able to push them into Oregon as we get that manufacturing facility license on our premises. So yeah, we expect to have pretty good returns in Oregon. The operator there that was already there, you know, and that we've been working with for the better part of the last 2 years, has been successful and has been profitable along the way. Although it was just a very small operation, kind of high-end flower operation that we wanted to expand to create more operating leverage for that business. And so yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, so I was just going to say, so you'll see that, you know, over the coming, you know, next 2 quarters or so.
Washington, still not sure whether you will or will not be able to close that, just to be clear. Is that right?
Right. No. So we announced it in November, and we expect to close it here this month. I mean, it's dragged on a little bit longer than we expected, but part of that's just legal stuff. But we expect to close that, I would say, in the next couple of weeks, hopefully, certainly before the end of the year is the goal. Okay.
So, is either Oregon or Washington or both? Do you see those becoming fully integrated? Will you ever be on the dispensary side there? You think is that the general direction or the hope or not necessarily?
It's certainly, what I can say is it's certainly an opportunity. We are looking at opportunities to have a vertically integrated operation in Oregon right now. In Washington, it's a little bit of a different story because of some regulatory frameworks in terms of owning a dispensary and owning a cultivator or manufacturer. But yes, I mean, we certainly do want to. We're looking at some various opportunities in those markets, and do believe that there's, you know, some opportunities will present themselves to be able to you know, more fully integrate in those markets. And, you know, and I should add, I mean, we're not just looking at Oregon and Washington. We're looking at kind of what I've been terming as those developed markets, the Nevadas, the Oregon and Washington, the Californias of the world. So there's certainly Colorado. There's certainly some markets where, you know, we think are interesting because the commodity price is kind of more stabilized, certainly compared to other more nascent markets. And, you know, there's guys making good money out there, and that we'd like to, you know, A, bring onto our team, and B, be able to expand and grow those operations as well.
Well, Taz, that's helpful. I mean, I think you know, hopefully we covered a few things that maybe people had on their minds, and we could clarify a few things. I guess as we sort of look forward, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that if you and I are having this conversation even a few months from now in a good way, I mean, it sounds to me like the next, you know, 6 to 12 months at CordovaCann are going to be pretty transformative. And like I say, we're really going to be looking at something much different than where we started with in August. I think, is that a fair statement, I guess?
No, absolutely. I mean, in August, we are at 2 stores. By that time next year, we should be at 15. And then I think you'll see some significant changes in the US, not only with Oregon and this pending acquisition in Washington, but, we're looking at building up that US presence. And hopefully we'll have made some strides, over the next, 7, 8 months here. And so you'll see a lot bigger asset base and hopefully a lot, bigger company in general.
Well, Taz, that's great. I mean, thank you for your time. I think we're going to, like I say, we'll keep track of what's going on here, and maybe at some point as we move forward, we'll come back and do this again. In the meantime, we'll certainly have some updates out for people around earnings and other significant events. So we look forward to talking to you into the future, and hope you keep pushing the rock. So. We appreciate your time, and have a great holiday if I don't talk to you before then.
No, thanks. You too, Dave. And really appreciate the opportunity, and we'll talk soon. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Taz.
All right. Take care. Have a good one.
You too.